My guest is Dina Rodzinski from the University of Toronto. Welcome to the show, Dina.
Thank you very much.
Dina, you've been doing research on Israelis in the diaspora, and particularly in Toronto.
Yeah.
If you were giving an overview of the Israeli community in Toronto, its size, its character, how would you describe it?
Okay, so it's interesting to say that the Israeli community in Toronto is growing quite rapidly. At the moment, the numbers that I have, that it is about 50,000 people, even more than 50,000 people in the GTA, in the Greater Toronto area. And we're talking about something like a quarter of the 200,000 great Jewish community in Toronto. So we're talking about an important number and significant number of about a quarter of them. So it became quite visible.
And how old is this community?
Okay, there are cohorts in this community. Not everyone, of course, comes at the same time. People are emigrated from Israel for decades to different places around the world, and especially to North America and specifically to Toronto. So in my interviews, I held interviews with people who live here for 40 years, 30 years, 20 years, 10 years, and 2 years.
Oh,
so I have all these different cohorts. And actually, these cohorts are quite different in the way they view themselves and the community and their attitudes towards Israel and the way they feel in terms of how should they develop their life here in Toronto as a community.
Well, let's go into that. But first, did their motivation for coming change over the years?
I must say that generally the people who leave Israel, they do it for two main reasons. The first reason being family relations, can be marriage or partners or other relatives that reside here and give them some network or some options to move and to better their life. And the other reason being economical opportunities, so a job offered here or another opportunities like studying abroad and so on and so forth. So political reasons or ideological reasons are not so evident in their motives. Most of the people who really move are do it due to economical or bettering their lives.
How do they handle and I'm sure it's changed over the years, the idea that you were a traitor if you left Israel, the ordeem and looking down, to I think a more enlightened attitude about that more recently. Do they incorporate that into their self-identity, and how has it changed?
Yeah, it has changed dramatically. Actually, in the past two decades, I would say there was a change. There was a big change. For many years, the people who emigrated from Israel were called yordim, the people who go down, and this is, of course, the other side of the olim, the people who go up. So both terms, immigrating to Israel is aliyah, emigrating from Israel is Yerida, is very ideological, of course, and has a lot of emotions in it. So it's been very hard for people who wanted to leave Israel or to improve their lives in some other places to say that we've left Israel. And both themselves and the community in Israel and abroad saw them as Yordim. This degrading term, Yordim, was applied to them. And many of them actually internalized this term and saw themselves as people who should be ashamed of themselves and of their actions. This is quite unique, you know. Other countries in the world, people go freely in and out, the residents, the citizens, and don't have all these emotional tensions related to this act of immigration.
They have to be Jews. They have to feel guilty.
That is true. So nowadays, the news they are feeling less guilty, and as I said, in the past 2 decades, people are feeling less guilty for leaving Israel, and the public opinion in Israel itself has changed. And both Israel is going global. Many people travel, get jobs, go back and forth from Israel. Both, also the Jewish community abroad. Many Jews who reside abroad have homes and opportunities in Israel. So there's a lot of dynamic. It's not so fixed as it used to be. Whether I'm in or out, I'm a yored, I'm an ole, and so on and so forth. Nowadays, really the social and cultural trends are much more flexible. There is even a title that's called flexible aliyah or partial aliyah. It applies for Jews who live abroad, who wants to partially reside in Israel the rest of the time.
Transnationals.
Yeah, it's not transnational, but also in terms of where you reside most of the year. So you can do it half of the year in Israel and half of the year in some other places if you are a person who can accommodate that.
But what about the relationship with the existing diaspora community? Because those who stay affiliated within the diaspora community tend to do it through synagogues. That's the general pattern, not always. The Israelis who went abroad and emigrated tended not to be affiliated. I think that's true. Is that not
Yeah,
true?
this is a correct observation.
How do they connect up then with the local community? What difficulties are there?
Okay, so you're pointing to an important issue, of course, and it is true, your observation is true. Many of the Israelis who come from Israel are secular people. So for them, Jewishness is Israeliness. For them, Jewishness is speaking Hebrew, right? For them, Jewishness is the Day of the Independence celebration. All these cultural related issues from Israel, music or books or whatever, that for the local Jews, it's different, of course. The local Jews, as you mentioned, tend to be gathered around the synagogues and the customs and tend to be more observant, while Israeli Jews do not do it. This is a source of tension between the two communities. This is a fact. Nowadays, there are more efforts on both sides to try to get and to be more acquainted with each other and work in collaboration, not only in terms of the religious practices, but basically through the federation efforts. In Toronto, they've established more organizations here in Toronto for the Israeli immigrants that help them or support their self-organization. There's a huge success of the Kahol Lavan school. It's the blue-white supplementary school held on Sundays, only in Hebrew only. And
but why isn't there an Israeli school full-time like you have Jewish schools? Why can't you have an Israeli school here? Why hasn't there been an initiative like that?
Well, the content is different. In the Jewish Sunday school, the students are taught the Siddur and prayers and the service, the religious service, as you mentioned. While in the Israeli Kahol Lavan school, they emphasize more the secular culture, meaning speaking Hebrew, and Hebrew as a first language, and doing all activities in Hebrew. While the Sunday school, many students just learn to decode the prayers even without understanding what they're saying. So there's a huge difference that lies here. And also the subject matter that they teach in the school will be more secular or nationalistic based in terms of Israeli nationalism and culture, rather than in terms of the Jewish customs or Jewish traditions as such.
I have a more practical question for us. Yeah. We broadcast a program that's called Israel in the Jewish World, and it's about Israel. We don't know what our audience is. We have some sense in going around that maybe half is non-Jewish altogether. We don't know how many Israelis watch, how many Jewish diaspora people watch who aren't Israelis. If you wanted to construct a television show, I'm asking you as a free advisor now, for the Israeli audience, 50,000 Israelis, what would you make sure was on it?
Definitely, as I mentioned, content that is related to Israeli inner affairs, to Israeli culture, Israeli society, not so heavily dominated by what we may call Jewish diasporic affairs. This is a major focus of the Israelis. Their identity is very related to Israel and to its culture, or you may say its secular culture, or national culture that evolved there. So anything that relates to the Israeli affairs as such will be quite interesting. And on the other hand, this initiative to bring the two communities together, I think it's very important, because there is no no reason why these two important communities shouldn't be able to communicate and to interact and to contribute to each other and to Israel in their mutual relations. So I should think this should be a very important goal to keep in mind.
Thank you very much for coming on the show. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.